Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Regulation and Appeals Committee meeting. I am Councillor Mountain, Chair of the Regulation and Appeals Committee. This is not the Appeals Committee, are we? To my right is Councillor Baxter, who will be standing in as Vice Chair for the committee. Before we start, may I remind everyone in attendance this afternoon, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. We have no members of the public, so we'll now move to part one of the agenda, the preliminaries. Are there any apologies for absence?
We receive apologies from Councillors Scott, Drayton, Evans, Gleeson, Savikian and Welberry. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any interest in respect of the agenda? Welcome to the members that have just joined. I'll just recap. Does any member wish to declare any interests in relation to this agenda today? Nope. Brilliant. Are there any questions from the member of the public?
There are none for this meeting, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do I have the permission to sign the minutes of the 12th of March 2024? Thank you very much. Move to part two, the agenda. The only item on this afternoon's agenda is the animal licensing policy, which starts on page 5 of your report. Anna, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Chair. So this report considers the draft animal licensing policy for Boston Borough Council. The purpose of the policy is to provide advice to businesses, operators and the public on the council's overall position with regards to the licensing, administration and enforcement of premises where licensable animal activities are carried on. The primary legislation that the policy relates to is the Animal Welfare Act 2006, the Animal Welfare Licensing of Activities Involving Animals Regulations 2018, the Dangerous Wild Animals Act 1976 and the Zoo Licensing Act 1981. These legislative articles delegate the responsibility for a number of functions to licensing authorities. These functions are selling animals as pets, providing or arranging the provision of boarding of cats and dogs, and that includes home boarding and daycare for dogs, hiring out horses, breeding dogs, keeping or training animals for exhibition, keeping any wild animal that is listed in the schedule of the Dangerous Wild Animals Act, and keeping and operating a zoo. Boston Borough Council does not currently have a policy in relation to animal licensing, and while there's no legal requirement to adopt a policy, it is important that a clear narrative is in place to demonstrate how we will carry out our statutory responsibilities. Whilst the policy relates to activities within the Borough of Boston, The policies of other councils in the partnership have been taken into account to ensure that there is a consistent approach to licensing across the sub-region. It's requested that the committee take note of the contents of the draft policy and approve a 6-week consultation with stakeholders. Any relevant responses will be presented to the next meeting of the Regulatory and Appeals Committee in March 2025. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I'll now open the floor for comments. Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions from me. So how will this policy be communicated to the residents it would directly affect, so the ones who would have to apply to us for a licence? Do we have a list of who they are at the moment, or?
Yes, Councillor, we propose to send it to them by email to all the current licence holders and any other relevant stakeholders. And if they prefer a hard copy, we're more than happy to provide that through the post to them as well.
Great. If I may, Chair, and you mentioned it will be sent to relevant stakeholders. Are any of these stakeholders organisations or people who are experts in the area of animal licensing, or is it just the general stakeholders that we usually go to for licensing?
It will be people like DEFRA, who are the ones that implemented the regulations, other local authorities within the area, but the main impact will be on licence holders, and that would be the focus of our attentions with regards to the consultation.
Just finally for me, Chair, I think the policy, it looks fine to me, but I'm not an expert in the area. And I just wanted to know, how are our staff going to be trained around this area? Have we already received training on it, or is there additional training that staff can go on? And now we're implementing this policy.
Particularly in respect of licences for animal activities, which is breeding, pet shops, hiring horses, training and exhibiting, and kennels and catteries, you have to be a trained inspector. At the moment, there's only one inspector at Boston Borough Council, but there is a plan to train more members of staff. There are also specific training courses you can go on for zoo licensing. That hasn't been undertaken because historically we've never had a zoo. If we were to have an application for a zoo, then we would definitely be getting members of staff trained up for that. So there is specific training, and it's always good to do continued professional development. So yes, there's courses available.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin.
Do I understand that we're completely new to this then, in which case who's been dealing with people that have got licenses at the moment? I mean, we've got quite a lot of people breeding dogs, I would think, in the borough, etc. So how's it been handled in the past?
Animal licensing's always been dealt with by Boston Borough Council. It was dealt with under previous legislation up until the regulations came in 2018. This is more a formalisation of what we do and how we do it and how we're going to deal with applications and enforcement. But I mean, I've been inspecting animal licence premises for 15 years, possibly. So, and then prior to me doing it, it was done by environmental health staff.
Yeah, please, Councillor.
We have a number of licensed premises across all of the disciplines at the moment, with the exception of zoo licensing and dangerous wild animals. We don't currently have any of those. We have a number of dog breeding establishments. We do get complaints about unlicensed breeders, and then we have to kind of try and build an evidence basis to take enforcement action against those. Sometimes they're people who don't require a license. It's not an easy task to enforce against dog breeders. It's quite a long-winded process. So yeah, we do keep an eye out for people who are doing unlicensed breeding.
And presumably this is this standardises issues across the 3 districts.
That's correct. In compiling the policy, I've looked at both South Holland's policy and East Lindsey's policy. It's very, very similar in what it says and how we plan to do things, and it sort of reinforces our limitations within the guidance and regulations.
Councillor Woodliff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just thinking about the licence fees. It's on page 16. The fees have been set in accordance with the principles of the European Union's Service Directive. Obviously, we're not quite in the European Union anymore. So have things changed on that regard? It's 3.1, page 16.
So we still use the local government guidance on setting fees.
Right.
Each fees are set locally. They're done on a cost recovery based on the time that it takes to deal with these licenses. They are quite time consuming in terms of inspecting and filling in inspection reports. So the local government association is still using that as their template for locally set fees.
Right. So have they increased recently? I mean, or
they were increased in April as part of a complete fee review across the whole board of licensing.
Can I continue? Sure. Is it fair to say that the income from the fees matches the costs of running the service, or is it significantly out of line of that?
I believe that, it was done on cost recovery. So I sat and the exercise was to look at how many hours it takes to pre-application advice, inspecting the premises, writing the inspection report, midterm inspections and advice. So in my opinion, they are accurate as to what they should be for the time it takes.
I'm just trying to think whether or not this is at a cost to the council as a whole, or whether this actually is.
There's no, we don't make a profit on them. It's not. There's no cost to us. Yes,
I'm not expecting to make a profit. I'm just making sure that the people who apply for this and the costs that are associated with it are met by the applicants, and there's no cost to the council as such, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, I can confirm that the costs are met by the applicants.
Good. Okay, thank you much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Marston.
Thank you, Chairman. Can more be done to enforce the licensing, to make sure that people are listening, as in regards of if somebody is being investigated and they do get charged, that it is actually advertised, that, you know, that it is, the news goes out there that they have been fined for whatever they're doing, and to make sure that everybody knows via maybe social media that what you need a license for, what you don't need a license for, to make everything clear, and that action will be taken if they don't follow the rules. And the one with horse loan, I didn't know that there was a license for horse loan, and I see horses being put out for loan regularly. Thank you.
I'll address the horses first, actually, because that's probably the most interesting part. Horse loan, there's two different elements to the horses. So if you go into a pony party and the horse is just standing there being petted, that would fall under the training animals for exhibition. If it's where somebody is actually physically riding that horse, that would come under the riding establishments element of it. We did some social media information during National Licensing Week. I think that was June this year, and we did a day on animal welfare with some posts that were on all our social media channels about what you need a license for, things to look out for when you're purchasing a puppy. We've got a page on our website where people can find advice and guidance on what should be licensed. I've got no issues with doing some more comms. I think it would actually be a beneficial thing. The sad thing is people only tend to come to us when they've had a problem, and that's the nature of it. If you buy a puppy and everything's fantastic, people don't think to flag it, and also it's not very often that we get inquiries from people prior to purchasing as to whether their breeder is licensed. So yeah, I think more communication through our comms section's a fantastic idea, and I'm happy to move forward with that.
If you want to continue.
Thank you. Can we also add some of the prosecutions into the news that goes out so that people do know that it is being enforced and that it will, you know, and regards to the horses, I've always been around horses all my life, and I know people that loan horses out, and I've never even heard of a license. Yeah, so I have always had horses, you know, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to prosecute somebody, that would be put out as comms, definitely. I mean, if you know of people that are loaning out horses, then feel free to let me know and I can pick that up for you.
Thank you. Just one more thing, you know, some of the prosecutions that you've had in the past, yeah, could they not be added as examples on there, please?
We haven't had a prosecution yet to date under the animal welfare regulations. Yeah.
Can I just come in with one, please, Anna? Something I just picked up on that Councillor Mostyn said. Is there anywhere on our council website where, it sounds daft, if I wanted to go look for a dog breeder, is there a list?
There's not a concise list. It falls under the scheme of delegation, officer delegated decisions. So it's not easy to access. We could certainly put some information on there, as long as we make sure we're not putting too much in way of personal details like the addresses of breeders. We could perhaps put a kennel name or a breeder name and just the license dates. I'm happy to pick that up in the new year and look to get that put on our website.
All I was thinking was something very similar to like the Food Safe website. You know, you can see that actually, yes, they are licensed, because you end up having to take the breeder's word for it, I guess, without making a phone call to us, and it's a lot of effort to pick up the phone these days. There
is a little protection in that where if people are buying through a pet purchase site like Pets for Homes, Pets for Homes, they will put people's license numbers on, and they expect to see copies of people's licenses if they're selling more than one litter. It's not a fail safe. People can be quite crafty. If they don't want to get caught illegally breeding, they'll find a way not to. But yeah, I'm happy to pick that up and speak to our website team about getting some information put on there.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Cantwell and then Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a thought that, you know, the majority of dog breeders and other animal licensing activities I expect would be in the rural parts in the 18 parishes of our borough. Is it possible to communicate this to parish councils as well as stakeholders? Because quite a few of the councillors on my parish councils do own animals. They do licensable activities as well. So it'd be good to get their input as well.
Yeah, I still have a nice list of contact details from the gambling policy consultation, so I'll add that to the list and make sure it's sent out to those as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anna, for all your hard work on this. Just some mention points, really. As I went through, obviously, as a policy, I was quite concerned, really, though, on page 13, paragraph 1.3, departure from a policy. I suppose because we deal with lots of policies and regulations, the next three paragraphs explain that, well, the council will consider this policy and its stated objectives whilst exercising a degree of discretion regarding requests to depart from the policy. And the other paragraphs as well mentioned then that it's quite flexible, really, and there could be minor departures, and it would be down by the licensing team leader.
I possibly wouldn't make that decision myself. I could, because I'm the person that's qualified under the regulations. I would first consult with my manager, my public protection lead, and then we would make a decision on that. If it was looking at refusal, I think we would bring it to committee.
It's just that it seems very flexible, doesn't it? Normally you have, well, policies, regulations which dictate the rules, but it seems very, it mentions discretion a lot. It seems very flexible.
I think it would depend on the circumstances that we were looking at departing from the policy on.
And the applicant would have to mention, like you might turn down an application, they would come back and say, well, you've not considered these facts.
Yes.
Ah, so it would probably not be to start with, it would be when they get a decision saying, well, you don't get a license.
That would be it, yeah. And if we were looking at doing revocations and things like that, then I think that would most certainly come to committee rather than be a decision that I would make.
Okay, thank you. The other mention point, obviously, as a partnership, most policies and regulations now are aligned across the partnership. So page 7, and you touched on this, and Councillor Austin as well. Why haven't we got one policy covering East Lindsey, South Holland and Boston then?
That's because we're all sovereign authorities, so our policies have to refer to the borough or district in which the work goes on. So although they're very similar, they're almost identical. It's just things, wording and placement of paragraphs. The policy has to just be for Boston because we're a shared partnership, but for regulatory purposes, we're a sovereign authority. And so you've got Boston, East Lindsey and South Holland that in those terms are separate entities.
Okay. And the other thing I was going to mention, it keeps mentioning about vet qualifications or vets. As we know, well, no offence to the vets in town, but based on some experiences that people mention, well, some vets aren't probably the same standard as others. So if we were going to involve a vet, do you have like a recommended list, or would you check their qualifications?
So for riding establishments, you have to use somebody that's on the RCVS, Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons register for doing riding inspections. We did have a vet that we used historically for breeding applications who no longer does it for us. We're now going to look at using the same vets as East Lindsey and South Holland, so we've got a consistent approach. We tend to try and use people that they're not the applicants aren't their clients, so we try and keep it separated so that there's no crossover and no conflict of interests. So next time it's only dog breeding and riding establishments that we.
And if we involve a vet, we have to cover the vet's charges, obviously, or does the applicant have to cover that?
That all has to be covered by the applicant or licence holder.
Okay, thanks. And just to mention, I was thinking, well, mainly in East Lindsey, but from time to time we have circuses. Many things have changed with circuses. It used to be lions and tigers and elephants, didn't it? But it tends to be probably donkeys and ponies, cats and dogs. So if that's like a case of them flitting in and flitting out, are they still covered by this policy whilst they're in the borough?
So the circus that we have here, we're actually their home authority because most of their animals are kept within our borough. So they come through us. I can at any point, if I want to go visit them on site in different locations, I can do that. But they tend to be licensed with one home authority. And then if there's any issues, so if they go elsewhere in the country, that local authority can contact us to make sure we're happy with their process.
Would that be the one at Old Leek Common Side where the animals winter?
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering as well the role of the RSPCA, an organisation that gets involved in things like this. Do we ever involve them, or do we just leave it to vets?
We leave it to vets. We don't tend to involve the RSPCA unless there are serious animal welfare concerns, and they're quite restricted in the action that they can take. We will take referrals from them if they believe that something is occurring that should be licensed and isn't, but generally speaking, we don't involve them in licensing matters.
Well, and last but not least, licence fees on page 16. So within our council, I think there's a general rule that each year we upgrade the licence fees, don't we, or fees and charges by the cost of the retail price index. So would that be automatically included? Because it doesn't mention about increasing it in line with RPI, etc. Or wouldn't that apply?
They would be index linked. If the council put up all of their other charges, they would go up as well. I think there's a proposal in 25-26 financial year for them to increase again.
Yeah.
By the standard percentage that everything else is increasing by where it can.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Is there any further questions? Wonders. Thank you very much for that, Anna. So on page 5 of the report, the recommendations is for the committee to consider the adoption of the animal licensing policy for the borough and approve the proposed policy for consultation with licensed trade, general public and relevant stakeholders. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Marsden and Councillor Woodliff as seconder. All those in favour? That's clearly carried. Thank you very much. That concludes this afternoon's business. I'll now close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.